Thanks for submitting your answers to that. It's really interesting to see what subjects everyone's studying, and welcome. So, hello, I'm Jenny, and I am the University Partner with JS Group. Welcome to Journal Your Way to Success with Barbara Bassot. This event is part of a series that we are hosting by the JS Group, but this event in particular is created in partnership with Macmillan. Very excited to have Barbara here. She has written multiple books on journaling, so very excited to hear all the hints and tips that she has. And I will be sending out an email after the event that will include a link to the video and also to with some information about the books that Barbara has. So you will be able to purchase them on our website. So without further ado, I will introduce Rosie from Macmillan, and she will explain a little bit more about the event and Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I hope everyone can hear me. If you're having any issues with the sound, then please drop us a message in the chat or the question feature, just so that we know everyone can hear what we're all saying. My name's Rosie, and I'm the Associate Commissioning Editor for Study Skills at Macmillan International Higher Education, and it's a pleasure to be working with Jenny and her colleagues from JS Group on this series of webinars. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Barbara Bassot today, who is from Canterbury Christ Church University and is really passionate about journaling as a tool and a pathway to academic, career and personal development. Today, I'll be putting some questions to Barbara about journaling, and hopefully will inspire you to pick up a pen or to load Notepad or Word on your computer or your phone and to give it a go for yourself. If you have any questions or comments during the session, then please put them in the questions or the chat field that you should see to the right-hand side of your screen. And for anyone who can't join us or would like to revisit the webinar at a later date, we will be recording today's session and it will be available on our YouTube channel after the event. I think that's everything from me for the moment. We will have time for questions at the end as well, so hopefully the next half hour will be interesting and practical for you all. So Barbara, I wonder if you could start by telling us a bit about how journaling can help students.
Yes, of course, that's great. Thanks. First of all, thanks very much for inviting me to do this. It's great to be with everybody today, and it's such a great opportunity to have to just take a bit of time out and talk about how journaling can help in all sorts of ways, actually, in student life, I believe. So journaling to me is really quite like having a good friend with you, and a good friend who is sort of never too busy. They're always there, they're always available, provided of course you remember to take them with you wherever you're going. They're not late, they're never too busy, and they're always available whenever you need them. And other key things are, you know, they're people, they're friends that never answer back or criticize you, or they never get tired of hearing the same things again. You know, things like, oh, I really thought I could do this, but now I feel I can't. Or whether it's, you know, I felt like this time I really thought I'd get a better mark than that, but I didn't. Or, hey, I got a fantastic mark. That's such great news. They're always there. I think one of the things about journaling is that it is so helpful on so many levels, because it's about getting things out of our heads. Now, if you're anything like me, then things tend to go round and round in my head, and round again. I suppose, you know, lots of us are thinkers, and when you're a student, of course you're a thinker because you have to be a thinker. But it's a way, journaling is a way of getting things out of our heads and onto paper. And very often, once we've made that process, started that process of getting something out of our heads onto paper, very often it's easier then to leave it there. And so psychologists call that the process of externalization. And it helps in all sorts of ways and is part of our self-care, because we all know what it's like when things go round and round in circles in our heads, and there seems to be no way, how do we get out of that? And it's journaling for me is a great way of alleviating stress and can definitely link with our mental well-being as well. So it's about that process of externalization. But I think most of all, it slows us down. Now, when you see this image on the right-hand side here of cars, lorries, we can't quite see it, but they're zooming along the motorway at night. And it feels like our lives are a bit like that, I think, a lot of the time. That feels like what my life is like, you know, that I'm zooming away, I'm going at great speed. And journaling and writing in a journal helps to slow us down. And it also gives us a focus. There are two things that really stand out in my mind when I think of journaling. One is that it gives us that focus, as we have here on the slide. Now, I always remember in the very early days of my academic life, and I was just starting to think about maybe writing my first book or my first article, and I went to a writer's workshop by a professor who was absolutely prolific in his writing. He wrote so much, and I thought, I wonder how he does this. I'm going to go to this writer's workshop. And what he said at that workshop that day turned things completely on its head for me, because I actually thought people like him, who were professors and published loads of things, did that because they understood a lot. So they had therefore then had a lot to write about. And he turned it completely on its head for me. And he said, I write in order to understand. So it's the writing that helps me to understand things. So in that sense, I need to write in order to understand. And that was, that was a real revelation to me. And it might seem like, you're in whatever year you're in on your different degree programs. It might be that you think, why does the university ask us to do all this writing and all these assignments? Well, are they being mean? Well, no, not really. It's because they know that actually it's the writing that helps us to understand things. And you may have already found actually that by writing you find that you understand more, and so it goes on. And it's because when we write, we have to process things. Now, if writing at university or wherever were as simple as, I don't know, let's say writing a nursery rhyme that we know off by heart already and just writing that would be really easy. But of course it's not. It's about writing about things that perhaps we find difficult to understand, but actually the writing gets us to that point of understanding. Now, in relation to the other point, another point on the slide, in relation to slowing down and focus, it's good to understand that when we actually do write, we write to process things, but that we write and it activates a certain thing in our brains. It's called the reticular activating system, or the RAS, the RAS. And what it means is it's actually very difficult to write something and to think about something else. And this is where focus, we get to back to the point of focus, that actually it's very difficult to write something and to think about something else. Now, if we were in a lecture room now, I might get one or two of you to come up to the front and we try a little exercise whereby I do something like, or I would say to you, we could do it now. If you've got a pen and a piece of paper, see if you can write your address, which you obviously know off by heart, and say a nursery rhyme like, I don't know, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and it's incredibly difficult to do. And I've done this in lecture theatres, and students come up to the front and they, yeah, I can do that. And yeah, and what tends to happen is someone writes, I don't know, whatever their address is, number 1, 2, 3, and then Humpty, and then they start the next bit of their address. And it's actually really, really difficult to do. And so it's because writing gives us focus. It stimulates the RAS at the base of our brains and it gives us focus. It's really, really difficult to do something else at the same time. So I think it can help us in all sorts of ways, that journal writing, definitely.
Thank you, Barbara. And you've alluded to this just now, but we all lead busy lives and sometimes it can feel as though there aren't enough hours in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So what tips do you have for getting the most out of journaling?
Well, I think one of the things is that there are several points, but the first one is make it easy for yourself. And part of that is about making it enjoyable as well. If you can make it enjoyable, then that's a good thing. Because then it's most of the things that are enjoyable we find fairly easy, and vice versa. I mean, I'm a fan of things like stationery, so I'll usually have 2 or 3 different notebooks on the go for different things, and I like different colours, and I like my highlighter pens, and I'm a big fan of pencils, like nice pens. I'll do all of that. And it's about making it enjoyable and making it easy as well. So it won't be a big file that I'll have to carry around, or it'll be something perhaps in my pocket, and so on. So first thing is to make it easy, make it enjoyable. And then the second thing is write little and often. I think we get into a bit of a thing whereby we think, oh, I have to write a lot, or I have to spend a lot of time doing it. But actually we don't. We really don't. I will often say to people, you'll be surprised if you gave it a go to do 15 minutes of writing 2, maybe 3 times a week, then you'll be surprised what you can achieve and how much that can help. But it's that thing of writing little and often that I think really helps. It doesn't have to be a big thing. The other thing is not to think about it too much. So not to overthink it. I don't know about you. I know that I think a lot. I'm one of those people actually. I go, oh gosh, I can think about things forever if I want to. It doesn't mean I do anything. But then don't overthink it, because actually with journal writing, which can be very free flow, it can be what I really think and what I really feel at the time. It can be quite spontaneous. If I overthink it, I write what I think I'm meant to write rather than what I really want to. And then it's not as valuable in many ways. So I think, don't overthink it. is definitely another tip. A lot of people will like to have what I call their writing space, maybe a place to write. You know, and that can be anywhere, and it can be wherever suits you. So for some students I work with, well, let's face it, at the moment our writing space is probably going to be at home. But under more usual circumstances, which hopefully we'll be getting to before too much longer, but we have to wait and see. But for a lot of students that I work with, their writing space might be their flat, their student room in hall. It might be the coffee shop, a little corner in the coffee shop. It might be their favourite desk in the library. It might be in that little bit of greenery on campus where there's a bench where they sit outside. It could be anywhere, and actually it really doesn't matter. What matters the most is that that's somewhere that you can go and that you can feel, I'm going to, you know, I'm using a bit of time here to write in my journal. And I feel comfortable, I feel relaxed, and so on. So finding your writing space, I think, is really, really good. The next thing is what I tend to say to so many students in so many ways, and this is do what works for you. Because this is something that you can have quite a lot of freedom over. You do what works for you. Don't think, well, I'm meant to be doing it in this way, so therefore I'm not finding it easy, but I should just try again and then try again. No, I really don't think that's good. I think the good thing is to try different things, find what works for you, and do that. And do whatever that might be in terms of journaling. We've talked already about time and how busy we are. Everyone is. And the final thing for now is to say, to get the most out of journaling, carve out a bit of time in your week. I've put carve out here in little inverted commas because actually it's a recognition that it's not an easy thing to do. I think it's something that we need to do quite deliberately very often, because time just has this way of escaping from us. And so if I'm deliberate about it and I carve out and I say, right, those 10 to 15 minutes then on that day, or you might look at your sessions, your lectures, etc. in a day and think, right, so I want to do some journaling today. When am I going to do it? I'm going to do it then. Carve it out and carve out that bit of time in the week, and it really will be worth it. It will be time that you find is sort of invested, really. One of my own particular phrases is this next one, which is the only time I have is the time I make. I put this quote into, I confess, I don't know which book it went into. I put this quote into one of my books, and I thought, right, I need to find the reference. You know how your tutor does at university, say, you need a reference for that, Barbara. I think I need a reference for this. Yeah, and I couldn't find one. So I thought, right, well, have I actually, is this my original work, or has no one ever said this before? If you find someone has said it, please let me know, because the last thing I want is to plagiarize or not give credit where credit is due. But this is one of my own mantras. I have a diary that it's often I think I don't want to look at it, but I have to. Of course I do. But this phrase, the only time I have is the time I make, is really one that I think was particularly important for me. And you may feel the same. I'm not sure, but I have no time. That's almost like at especially busy times, that is my baseline. I have no time. So therefore, the only time I have is the time that I make. If something is important for me, I will make the time to do it. And I think in many ways, that's a very good principle for us in life more broadly and more generally, that if something is important, I will make time for it. But it will be, when it comes to journaling, something like those 15 minutes. And I sometimes think in my own life, well, if I can't make 15 minutes, actually, I am too busy and I need to get better at saying that word no, for instance. But when one of the thoughts here is, when can you make time for journaling? Let's imagine hopefully you've come to the webinar because you're interested and you maybe want to give this a try. Maybe you're a complete journaling convert already. It's possible. But anyway, whatever, when can you make time for journaling is a good question to ask yourself. So in relation to, if you're new to it, it might be that you need to get going with it. So this is where we've got a little activity for you, which is a good way, if you're thinking of trying to get going, something to get you started. Now, Stephen Covey, in his work on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about the importance of having a vision for the future. It might be some kind of mental picture, for instance, of where we want to be, where we'd like to see ourselves in however many months, weeks, etc. time. And he talks about having a vision for where we want to be. And the value in that is, he says, it helps us begin to see the present, where we are now, more clearly. But perhaps most importantly, how we can get to where we want to be. It's a bit like, if we don't know where we want to go and where we want to get to, how do we know how we're going to get there? And so the idea that this activity is to imagine that it's your graduation day, whenever that's going to be. It might be quite soon. It might be a little bit further down the line. I don't know about you, but I'm really hoping it's a real graduation day rather than a virtual graduation day. But let's wait and see. But imagine it's your graduation day. What do you hope it will be like on that day? And you might want to consider questions like, who's going to be there? What will you be wearing? Now you might say, well, and most students do opt for the traditional cap and gown, but what are you going to wear underneath? What you're going to be wearing? Because you probably, I hope anyway, going to have some kind of celebration afterwards, and you want to know what you're wearing. What degree classification are you hoping for? Now, universities, in my experience, vary in this. Some say your name and your degree classification and go through the gradings. Other universities say when people have got a first. Other universities don't say at all. So we don't know what will happen in your situation. But when you collect that degree, that certificate, what do you want it to say? What do you hope it's going to say? So imagine it's graduation day, and what do you hope it will be like?
Thank you, Barbara. I hope that's given all of our attendees something to think about and to mull over. Moving on, we've all struggled with writer's block at some point, whether it's finding the right words for an assignment, or your CV, or any other project that you might be working on. Do you have any strategies for freeing the mind and just getting started with journaling?
Yes, I do. I think it's a bit what I would call counterintuitive, because if you've got writer's block, okay, so I'll be honest, when I get writer's block, which I do from time to time, when I get writer's block, my usual reaction to that is, you know what, I'll read some more. And when I talk to students about writing assignments, say, oh, I'm really stuck. So I've read some more, and I think, yeah, okay. Actually, almost like my top tip for this goes back to the story that I told earlier about the professor. Actually, it's to write. And it is just to write. Because by writing, that's how you'll get unblocked. I was trying to think of like a practical example and I thought of when I've got a block sink. Yeah, I don't want that. Nobody wants that. But when I've got a block sink, I don't go away and just think, right, well, if I do some dusting and come back to the sink, it will unblock it. It doesn't, does it? It's a practice. You have to do something and you have to take that action. And writer's block, if we get writer's block, and a lot of people do in all sorts of situations. We haven't talked about personal statements yet, but boy, can people get writer's block with personal statements for things. Just write something. And Bolton and Delderfield have got this great little exercise for helping people get started with writing or to unblock with writer's block. And they call it the 6-minute write. And the idea of this is that you write for 6 minutes. So you time yourself, you get your smartphone probably, you set it, you get your notebook or a sheet of paper or whatever, you time yourself and you write whatever is in your head, and it doesn't matter what it is. Again, you might think, well, how will that help? But honestly, it does, because it's part of that unblocking process. So you write whatever is in your head, and this is a first if you're at university. Don't worry about spelling, grammar, punctuation, or referencing. Isn't that a relief? Don't worry about any of that. Write freely. Don't stop. Just keep going. Time yourself on your smartphone and stop when you've done the 6 minutes. Now I do this exercise quite often with students. Most students, but not all, when my smartphone goes and says it's time to stop, they look up and say, oh wow, is it time to stop already? But others, and there are some people who look over to me after about 2 or 3 minutes and sort of I can see that they've dried up. And so I just have to give them 1 or 2 words of encouragement. What's in your head? Write about that. And that's usually all it takes in that sense. But it's a really good exercise to give that a go if you've got writer's block, definitely.
Lots of great tips there, Barbara, and I love the kitchen sink example. I wish those sorts of things would just fix themselves.
Absolutely. You and me both.
So most, if not all, students will probably have heard the phrase that a degree is no longer enough. How can journaling help with career planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another really useful role for journaling, because whatever you're doing at university, and most of the students that I work with are doing other things as well as being students. So in other words, a lot of them are doing paid work. Some of you will do internships. Some are doing volunteering. And still some are able to be involved in student activities, although there hasn't been, with the best will in the world, it's not been as easy since the virus to be able to do things like have a really active involvement in student societies or the Students' Union, etc., etc. But if we bring journaling into the frame, what it does is, by writing about all of these experiences in a journal, it helps us to reflect on our experiences, not only to keep a record. That's one thing that is really important, because basically it's so easy to forget. In our busy lives, we easily forget what we've done, even those things where we might think, oh, that standout moment, I will always remember that. And we're kind of on the bus on the way home and thinking, what was that thing that I thought that I would always remember? Oh yeah, okay. But if we've written it down, of course, we've got a record of it. And again, thinking about writing being about processing things, it is really important. But it gives us that record. So when we go on at whatever point to write those, and I use this word advisedly, those dreaded personal statements, whether it's for a job or an internship, even for volunteering quite often, or for postgrad. You think, what have I done? What have I done? And we've got a record there to go back to. But the other thing that's important here, I think, is that it depends. People are different. Some of us are really good at remembering things, and that's great. Some of us also are really good at remembering all of those things that went wrong, all of those things that didn't go so well. And if we've written in a journal, hopefully we will have written about all those positives as well, because that's really important. But I think having that kind of record, etc., is really important and really valuable. And so there could be writing in a journal about an experience, let's say, of work, something like, oh, I seem to be in a really great team at the moment. These people, I'm finding it easy to work with, and so on, could then really help when it comes to writing personal statements and so on. And of course, hopefully after that, when you get asked certain things at interview as well.
Thank you, Barbara. Lots of things for students to take away there. What advice do you have for students who perhaps aren't sure whether journaling is for them?
I would honestly say give it a try, give it a go. But I am very mindful of what I said earlier, and I do stand by it. If it helps you, do it. And if it doesn't, don't. But what I would say, I'd want to add a little word in there, and that would be give it a proper try. Give it a go. Let's say, right, I'm going to try writing in a journal twice a week for a month. 15 minutes, 2 lots of 15 minutes. I'm going to give it 2 hours in a month, over a month. I think that's giving it a proper go. I think otherwise it would be very easy just say, oh, well, I tried it, but it didn't work for me. Give it a proper go. But if it works for you and if it helps, then do it. And if it doesn't, then don't, and move on to something else, to try other things and find something that does work for you. Because I think there are, as I mentioned earlier, so many benefits to this. So a lot of this is about knowing yourself, and knowing what works for you, I think. So we've got some other ideas here on the slide. I mean, you don't have to write. A lot of journaling is about writing, obviously, but actually there are many other ways of journaling, as it were. If we look in a bit of a broader way at journaling, you don't have to write. And there is absolutely no doubt that some of us are more visual than others. Definitely. And so it might be that you get much more from, drawing a diagram, a line drawing, or a sketch. You might find that, I mean, I don't know about you, but who doesn't these days love their smartphone? I love my smartphone. I take it everywhere with me. It's just here next to me, and I love it. And I've got all my favorite photographs on my smartphone. And they're great tonics. They're great things to look at, to remind me of people, remind me of places, etc. And they're a great tool to have as well. Smartphones are great for all sorts of reasons, of course. And then, I mean, I know quite a lot of people who do audio recordings on their smartphone. There's no reason why, instead of, as you're walking to campus, or or sitting on that bench or in that coffee shop or wherever, rather than writing in a book, if you're more of an audio learner, you speak into your smartphone, then you can listen to it back. And that's absolutely fine. I've often done that myself when I've been busy, and when if I have an idea for a particular piece of academic writing or a book chapter and I don't want to lose it, I capture it in an audio recording. Because there's a great thing about journaling generally. It's about capturing things, catching them while they're there. It might be that you find other things that help you as well. I mean, we've got quite a lot of authors who write about things like crafts, whether it's carpentry or sewing, or there's a whole range of different things that can help us to reflect, as well as journaling. The big message here is know yourself, know what you like, know what you're good at, know what you want to do and how you learn, and do that. And don't do the things that, it's not about what you feel you should do. Do what works for you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Lots and lots of ideas for people to take away, and we've had some good questions flooding in, which I'll put to you in a moment. But next, I just wondered if Jenny could come back and just introduce the competition that we have going during today's webinar.
Hello again. So a lucky attendee has the chance to win this book, The Reflective Journal. And Rosie is in the process of selecting the lucky winner, and she will shout your name out. Woohoo! It's very exciting. And all you need to do is, if your name is shouted out, that to contact Rosie and let her know your address, and she will send the copy of the book to you. How are we doing on the draw, Rosie?
We're doing well. We've got quite a few names to flick through, actually.
Need a drum roll.
But I will be in touch with Emily Cunningham and Kerry Mack after the event to organise your copies of the Reflective Journal.
Congratulations!
And I will now open up the questions. If you do have more, then please put them in and I'll get through as many as I can in the time that we've got left. So we have one from Gillian, actually, which is really interesting and not something that we sort of touched upon really in the presentation aspect of this webinar, which is there a different value to handwriting over typing?
Oh, well, that is such an interesting question, because yes, there is. And actually, there's quite a lot of research that shows that it's when we write by hand that generally it is more valuable. There's been interesting research done into students who let's say, go to lectures and write by hand, and those who take a laptop with them and type. And there's fairly consistent research actually that shows that students who take handwritten notes get higher marks than those who type. And I was a bit shocked by this on one level when I read this, but actually the reason is that most of us can type quicker than we can write by hand. I know that's the case for me. Whenever I'm writing a book, I'll type it. I don't write it all by hand because typing for me is much quicker. So what this research has found is that if you sit in a lecture theatre, when students sit in a lecture theatre and take notes by hand, obviously you can't write down everything the lecturer says. And so what you're doing by writing by hand is you're already processing what that lecturer is saying, and you're already developing your understanding. Whereas when you're typing, you're much more likely to try and type every word. And so I think there's a definite difference between writing by hand and typing, and they use different parts of the brain as well. So yeah, good question.
Thank you, Barbara. Another question. This one is from someone with dyslexia and ADHD who has tried to journal a few times, but finds that it makes them very aware of writing mistakes and sometimes makes them feel down. And they've tried it a few times and feel really good about it when they do manage to do it. But what tips do you have to help them keep going when it feels hard?
Yeah, I'd only do a bit. It's back to that thing of do a bit and then maybe do something different. Possibly do it in a different way as well. It might be that doing some audio recordings or doing some line drawings, or that might help as well. But I certainly would say don't feel, oh, I've got to write a page, or I've got to do this for however long. And because I think it's almost a sure way to make us feel bad about ourselves, to make us feel like, oh well, so I didn't do it, and so on. I think the big message too about when you're reflective writing, when you're journal writing, no one else needs to see it. Does it really matter if there are then lots of, what a tutor might say would be mistakes? Does that matter? I don't think it does. And because nobody else is going to see it or read it. But I'm a big advocate of do what works for you, and don't think you have to do things in certain ways. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point about reminding yourself that it's just for you. No one else
Yeah.
has to see it.
Definitely.
Another question, this is from Alison. When you write or when you journal, what do you actually put on the paper? Is it course material, how you're finding that material, what you're enjoying?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's highlighted there is the difference between note-taking and journaling. So note-taking for me would be where I would be, let's say, in a lecture or a seminar, and I would just be taking notes on what's happening, the things I want to remember, the recommendations from the tutor for reading, and so on. Journaling would be something that I would do later, and that I would do, as I said, maybe once or twice a week. some people do it every day. I don't want to minimize it and say only do it. I mean, do this as often as you like. But it's then me looking back and thinking about what I've learned and what I've gained. I often liken it to most students I teach, most of them can drive, and I often liken it to the mirrors that you use in your car. You know, like you've got your driver's mirror and your wing mirror, but if we think about the driver's mirror up here, you know, we look in it so that we can see what's behind us, so we're looking back, but we're doing that so that we can move forward safely. So if I'm on the motorway and I want to overtake, then I will look in my driver's mirror to see what's behind me, make sure in my wing mirror that there's nothing coming up on my blind spot, so that I know that it's safe to move out and to move forward. And I think journaling is quite like that. It's about looking back so that I can look forward. I mean, you know, there are critiques of journaling, of course. Well, isn't it just like you're just looking back all the time, aren't you? I mean, it could be likened to just, looking at your navel. It's just about looking at yourself, isn't it? Well, yes, it is, but it's all about me moving forward. That's really what it's for, so that I can make progress, so that I can reach that graduation day, and I want that graduation day to be and what I want it to be like, really. Yeah.
I think with your mirrors analogy, you've sort of almost answered this next question, but I wondered if you had anything
sorry.
else to add to it. Anna's asked, is it beneficial to keep journals and look back at them, or is it better to keep moving on and keep journaling?
I think you need to do both. I think there's great value in both. It's actually Bolton and Delderfield, I believe, who talk about the value of looking back and finding themes within your journal. Because very often, when I talk to students and I say, whether it's about an assignment or their module results or their dissertations, very often I'll say to them, well, so how was the previous semester? What happened in the previous semester? So let me just give you an example. I'll have a student who comes and says, oh, I'm running out of time. I've got these real issues with time management. And and so on. I say, well, let's just look back a bit. What happened last semester and the semester before? And very often, not always, but very often, there are patterns that you can see, and it's that looking back to see if there are themes. Hang on a minute. There's something happening here that seems to happen more than once. Then you're in a position to begin to address it and to start to move forward. Because unless you recognize it, it's like anything. Unless I recognize it, I'm just probably going to do the same thing again. So I think there's great value in doing both. I really do, especially in looking back. And there's a piece of research on reflective practice that was carried out, and it's called From Patches to Quilts. I can't sew. I'm not into sewing. It's not my thing. But if you think of a patchwork quilt, you think of patches, and you got these different patches that you sew together to make a beautiful quilt. It's a bit like that. You need to get the patches. You need to look back on the events, what's happened, and look for the themes and bring them together as you journal into the future. Yeah. Thank you. That was a great question.
Thank you, Barbara. And we've got a few people actually who are interested in sort of digital journaling, I suppose, and using other tools rather than writing in a paper copy. Do you have any recommendations in terms of apps or tools that can help students with this, or indeed ways of approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, there are journaling apps. I mean, there are quite a lot of them. And I think in many ways it's like lots of other things, you know, on your good old smartphone that I love on my smartphone. It's about just trying a few and see which ones you like. There are quite a lot of them, and it will depend on a lot of it will depend on what you like visually. Some people like something that's very plain and very simple. Other people like something that's got more of a visual angle on it. I think there are some apps that you can use. Obviously, you could then use those on a tablet. I think one of the things with apps is they don't necessarily give you lots of space, especially on a phone. You may not be able to see a lot of text if it is text that you've written on there. But on something like a tablet, of course, it's much easier. And I think the tip again is to have a go with it and have a try, and you know, if you're in your friendship group, if there are people who are trying different things and looking for different things, and share the things that you like and the things that you enjoy, um, and do more of that, because then you'll keep going with it. So if the writing by hand thing isn't really for you, try something else. Yeah, try an app by all means. But I can't recommend a particular one, because I find people are very different in what they like.
Thank you, Barbara. And I mean, as you touch upon in your journals, some students will be required to keep a reflective journal as part of a
Yeah.
course or their program of study. And we've got someone here who's mentioning that their journals tend to be a bit more descriptive. And how can they, address that and move forward and produce something that their lecturer is expecting that's a bit more critically reflective?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've got students at the moment who are working on 2 reflective pieces for me. And what I say to them is use a model or 2. The reflective journal, of course, has quite a lot of reflective models in it. So use a model or 2, because those models help you to dig deeper into whatever it is that you're being asked to reflect on. So it might be, I don't know what courses you're on, in terms of those of you that are asked to write reflections, but you could be, I think typically you might be in something like teacher training, nursing, medical, social work, counselling, and so on in the social sciences. And I think what tutors want to see is that deeper level of reflection. And what they don't want is, I did this, I did that, then I said that, then this happened, and then that, because of course that's descriptive, and that generally will get a mark, but it will get a mark at a certain level, and it might not be that level that you know, as high a mark as you want. If you then are using a model and applying that model to your own experiences, particularly models that help you to explore your feelings, any assumptions that you might be making beforehand or during an experience, and if you're maybe it or that also helps you to look at your values and your take on life and how you come at things, your worldview, as we call it. Those kinds of models will be very helpful, and using them step by step and referring to them, I think, will help, definitely, in my view. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got a nice comment actually from Carla in the chat that I thought I'd share just in case you can't see it at the moment, which is saying how journaling would be really good for your mental health too, because you've got your journals to look back on. You can see how much you've achieved and how far you've come, which is, I think, a really nice way of looking at it.
It is. It definitely is, because it's so easy to forget. So if you kept a journal in your first year and you're in the third year and you look back, you know, you will have grown and developed a lot, and that will be very encouraging, I believe. Yes. Thank you for that, Carla.
I think we've got time for one last question. So this one's quite an interesting one. Would you say that journaling is the same as writing a diary?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think there's 3 terms that are used that I'm familiar with. There's a journal, a diary, and a log. Sometimes you might be asked to keep a reflective log, but journal, diary, and log, to me, they all mean slightly different things. But of course, the academic world is notoriously confusing because people sometimes use the same word to mean different things. But in my mind, the differences are: a journal is free flow. It will probably be, it could be on my phone, it could be on my tablet, it could be in a notebook, but there won't be any headings, there won't be anything there. It might be lined paper, it might be plain paper. It will be free flow writing. A diary will usually have dates on it. So I have a diary that I use a lot, and we have our online diaries as well, but they all have dates, don't they? So a diary will have dates in it. It will usually, hesitate to say always, but it will, I think, always limit what I write on a particular day, because there'll be a space. So that's a diary. Now, a log to me is more of a factual, I did this on this date. I'm not a Star Trek fan particularly, but you know, Captain Kirk said, what log? Can't, it's gone out of my mind now. Star Trek log dated and kept this log of everything that happened. And that to me is a log. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Sorry, I can't help you with the Star Trek reference there, Barbara. I'm afraid I've never seen it.
No.
Thank you very much, everyone, for all of the insightful questions, and to Barbara and Jenny for your time this afternoon. We'll wrap up here, but just a reminder that there will be a recording of the session available in the coming days, and keep an eye out on your emails for one from Jenny with a link to the recording and some more information about the reflective journal. And hopefully we'll see you at another event again soon. Have a good rest of the afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining.